So we're back, another episode, Post-Fades Cheesesteaks, episode 43. Got myself, Dakota, and we got Nick back as a guest on. Today we will be doing a projection for the all 32 starting quarterbacks across the league for the 2021 season. So what we'll do is we'll go division by division, starting with we'll start with the NFC. So we'll do NFC East. I'll let Nick go first, and then I'll give my take on who I think the quarterback will be. We'll flip to the West, and I'll go, he'll go. So nice little back and forth here. So as we get right into this, Nick, NFC East, Philadelphia Eagles, who's going to be the quarterback? It's always a question mark now.
Well, I can remember watching the draft on Zoom with you last year, and when that Hurts pick came through, I think we both almost fell on the floor. But I think that I can say, going into this season, week one, I see him as a starter. I see them coming into this year, giving this the full evaluation period, give him the offseason, give him the preseason. Bring in a veteran. Obviously, we're hearing things like Marcus Mariota, and I've heard a lot about Tyrod Taylor being kind of that perfect sort of guy to bring in. Guy who'll push him, has that similar skill set where he's mobile but can throw. Which I would like. It's all going to come at the cost of course, we know we're working with no salary. That's not really where I want investment, especially if I think the only way it makes it palatable to eat all that dead cap is if your starting quarterback's only making $900,000 as a second round.
True.
So that kind of averages out the cash. So if you can bring in a veteran for low money who knows he's going to be the backup, I'm happy with it. But overall, I hope they don't give us another heart attack and pull some draft day one trade up and get rid of picks to move up and take a Justin Fields or Trey Lance. That would really just spike the fan base.
Taking another North Dakota State quarterback people would lose their mind. But yeah, I agree with you. Jalen Hurts. I mean, from what I've been hearing recently, it seems like that's going to be their idea, is like, let him ride this year, see what you have. If not, you can move on, look for another quarterback. But yeah, I'm kind of excited. I want to see the kid work. I want to see Jalen get his chance and, work with I heard he's already trying to work with the receivers down in like Texas or something. Work with the team, get used to the system, the new system, and see where it goes. I think based on what we saw, we saw that flash in New Orleans where he lit up the Saints, which is a very respectable defense. And then, last few games, some teams, kind of figured him out a little bit, but you gotta understand, it was like 4 games. He didn't have time to adjust himself. So, give him a full off season, a full season, to play. And I think it's a very 50-50. He could definitely come out and be like, bona fide starter, star caliber, or he could fade out and be middle of the pack starting quarterback. So we'll see.
I think just one thing is I hope that this is a fair assessment year. That's really my big thing. Like, I hope that they give him an opportunity to actually see what he has.
Right.
Give him another piece around him, whether it's Pitts in the draft, whether it's Chase in the draft, whether it's Smith in the draft, whether it's somehow Sewell drops to you and you get him a top talent offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
Give him a legitimate chance, because at the same time, where I agree, I mean, he showed flashes. We can talk about the total yards and how much he averaged per game, which was very high. He showed rookie moments, but he also showed very young, talented moments. He did some things I don't see many other quarterbacks in the NFL do. But at the same time, he came into a situation where we all know how much chemistry matters in the NFL. And each passing day just shows us how more and more toxic that locker room was last year. And it was a bad situation. They went from quote unquote in first place, and I said all year how sick of it I was, hearing that we have to keep starting Carson. We're in first. We have to keep starting him.
Yeah.
And I kept saying all year, I was like, we look terrible. Like, I don't want to hear, we're in first, and we're the fastest slow person right now. And it's just a silly thing to keep doing. I hope they give him a full season, because at the end of the day, even if you find out at the end of this year, okay, you know what, maybe he's not our definite starter, you have an opportunity to go into his year 3 and bring somebody in to compete, whether that's a veteran, you'll have money from free agency, or if he doesn't do well, really that means we're picking high again. Yeah. And then we could potentially have either 2 second-round picks or that second first round pick from the Colts, you trade up, you get a quarterback next year. So it still gives you the opportunity, but I think we need to know, is he our guy going forward? Is he a backup, or is he a trade piece that we move on to another team? And I think you only know that if you give him the full off season, you give him preseason, and then you just let him ride out. Let him ride the highs. I also want to see what he does at the lows. I want to see what happens when things don't go his way, when the Philly media gets on him. Mm-hmm. Does he have that spine? I mean, I personally think he does after seeing what happened with him in college.
Yeah.
He
was benched in the national championship. I mean,
yeah. And he came back and supported the guy who took over the rest of the full season. And when he was called up, when his number was called, he did the best he could. And then he went and, was a Heisman finalist on a new school. So personally, I'd like to see a full season. I cannot imagine them trading up and getting rid of draft capital, a team this many needs, but it's the Eagles, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we could always talk about this forever, but I do like your point in saying that his character, I think, is huge, because within 2 games, the whole team was rallied behind him, believing in him. Like, his press conferences don't really convey how he really is on the field, and I think you kind of get that competitor nature out of him. And Carson was a weird competitor where he kind of he would boost himself up almost. That's how I kind of interpret it. Whereas, Jalen's kind of I'm going to make these, my rest of my teammates hype to get me hyped so we can play better. So we'll see what happens. I agree with you. I just hope they don't, they don't do this as we drafted him, let's do it. I hope they give him the full benefit, try to build around him, so. Yeah. Moving on to Dallas. This one I had blank for a little bit, because I honestly have I really would not be shocked if Prescott's not a Cowboy. But I think Dak deep down does want to stay in Dallas, and they might have to make some moves. Might have to trade, maybe free up Zeke or one of the receivers. But I think eventually they'll get a deal done, and whatever it's going to be, probably top 5 money for a quarterback. So Prescott in Dallas is what I would go with.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I don't, as unclean as this whole situation has played out with him, I think that it's 2 guys being businessmen who are just leveraging, and they're trying to wait it out to see who can wait the longest. Yeah. I think the Cowboys saw last year what happens when you take him out of that offense. It's kind of funny, him not playing ended up probably, it's weird. You always worry about injury costing you money. I think an injury actually made him money, which is not something you almost ever see, because you got to see, the 500 yards a game they were putting up with him. And then he went out and that offense looked inept. And to think about, and you can't tell me that Zeke's fall off didn't have to do with him losing Dak. I know, I mean, I had Zeke in fantasy. He was fumbling like crazy. He looked so checked out. He was dropping catches he always made. The line started getting decimated. They still have a great receiving core. I think they find a way to bring him back. I'm leaning a little more towards the Kirk Cousins situation, where he gets tagged again and then moves on after this year. Because if I'm him, if they don't pay me top dollar, this is not the year to get money somewhere else. It's not. So if you're him, you say, you know what, I'll take the $37 million from you. I'll take the second tag, and then I'll go. But just know that if you tag me again, I'm not negotiating with you.
100%. I would. It's just, in my eyes, that would be, if you get tagged. I don't know how many times a player gets tagged twice and then goes back and re-signs long-term with the team. And I'm glad you pointed out, because I actually had to Google because I didn't know. But if Prescott gets tagged again, which the Cowboys would have to do by March 9th, he would receive $37.7 million.
Yep.
Or it would be against the Cowboys cap that much. So, which is a lot.
And honestly, you know who the highest paid quarterback is over the last 5 years, right?
Mahomes?
It's Kirk Cousins.
Oh, yeah.
Because the double franchise tag.
His was fully guaranteed too, wasn't it?
You got big money. You got paid big. You got the double franchise tag from Washington, and then He got that nice big contract from
The 84 million or something like that.
he got big, but and then his franchise tag was fully guaranteed. Those were both about 30 apiece.
Yeah.
So it was, and honestly, like if I'm him, like a team will pay him. If they won't pay him this year, there's not a situation where I could see. I mean, the Panthers I could see if they don't do it. I think the Panthers would pull the trigger there. They're a team I had the hardest time. We'll talk when we get there. They're the team I had a really hard time figuring out which way they go. I could see that. But his market gets much bigger if he waits another year. I think Jerry can't let him walk. I think he tags him one more time. I don't necessarily see a deal. I wouldn't be, I guess, shocked, but I'm 60-40. He plays on the tag. 40% he actually gets a deal.
What do you think? Like, I mean, not to keep harping on this, but what do you think is really holding back Dallas from just locking him down? Do you think that Jim Jones and some of those other pieces up in their front office don't fully believe in Prescott? Is that the reason why?
They want to lock him up. I mean, it's a business thing. They want more years. If he would have agreed to 5 years last year, he would have signed. But he wanted 4. He wanted, and again, that's a business move. He's looking at the TV contracts. He's looking at like his age. He's looking for the third, because you got to remember, it's not like he got paid on the first contract. He was a 3rd round pick. That's true. He was on a bargain contract his first 4 years. It wasn't like the Mahomes of the world and the Desean Watsons who in their first contract they made 12, 13 million. He made 3 million, 4 million over that first 4 years playing at a Pro Bowl level.
Yeah.
So he's looking to maximize his dollars, and I don't blame him. He's trying to play it out. I think Jerry has got himself into a position where he's already paid so many other people, and if you look at that defense, I mean, he can't continue to ignore it.
Oh no.
So I don't see it getting done, because I think if it was going to get done, it would already have been done.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to the New Jersey Giants, whatever you want to call them. This one's pretty easy. Danny Jones. I mean, I don't see anything about that, so we can move on. Washington is interesting to me because I could see a couple players getting traded there. I could see them drafting a quarterback, but ultimately, which is the idea a lot of people are floating around, I could see a combination of Heineke, which they extended for 2 years, and Cam Newton going back with Ron Rivera. So that's my take on the Washington's quarterback situation. Could be Heineke plays like 5-6 games, and they're like, wow, this guy's really not it. Cam steps in, or Heineke keeps it for the whole year, or Cam beats him out. But I think those two will battle it out for starting.
That's funny, because my backup option for them is Cam Newton as well, going back to play with Ron Rivera.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a number 1 spot for him, but that is my number 2 spot for him. But I guess my first sort of like QB carousel move is I see Washington making a trade for Sam Darnold. I see Darnold playing for Washington. I think if you look at the team construction, you have a young top running back in Antonio Gibson who showed you a lot of promise. Mm-hmm. Terry McLaurin, I mean, being a captain in his second year, really
underrated.
Being a stud with nobody to get him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you look at that team, if you find that sort of like, and it's going to be a buy low. That's the reality too for them, is the Jets, I think, are going to trade him so that they can take Zach Wilson at 2, which is a little spoiler for later. But I think that they are going to move, and I don't think it's fair, to be honest. I don't think it's fair to Darnold for them to move on. But I think that's the NFL. If your shiny new toy doesn't work out quickly, you move on to the next shiny new toy.
Yeah.
And there's new coaching staff, there's new front office. They're not tied to Darnold. I think you always want to kind of pick your guy when that front office gets moved around. And Washington, because they won the playoffs, like I said all year, where I'm like, not won the playoffs, they won the division. And I said, is it worth it to win the division to lose 10 spots in the draft? I said, I don't think it is in this year, just to get blown. Although they did get the Super Bowl champions, the best game that they played in the playoffs.
They did. They gave them a run for their money.
Yeah, and Heineke's happy they made it because he got paid because of it. But they're not high enough to draft a guy. I think this year it's pretty obvious the top 5 quarterbacks are probably going to be gone the first 12 picks.
Yep.
So I see them making a trade. They can probably buy low. Maybe this year's first, maybe a future first, or maybe a future second or third or day two, which I think is reasonable with where they're drafting. I think the Jets are going to be in play for a new guy. So Darnold, I think, is going to be the guy who ends up in Washington because he's young. He is like younger than some quarterbacks coming in this year.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
He's only like 22, I think.
23, I think.
23, he's younger than Jalen Hurts, know. So I think if they feel like they can get him to grow and mesh with McLaurin and Gibson, that's better than them bringing in a veteran because they'll have them both all of them long term. So I see Darnold there. My backup option if they go veteran would be bringing Cam Newton to Washington.
Yeah, so Sam Darnold to Washington is my second option for Sam Darnold. I have him going somewhere else ultimately. But yeah, I think that's very, very plausible to happen. So that wraps up the East. Moving on to the NFC West, which in my opinion is the best division of football right now. Seattle Seahawks. Who's their quarterback, Nick?
Let Russ cook again. I mean, I think he stirred up the pot. I think it was more so of a not I'm gonna leave you, but no, I have options.
Right.
It was one of those times where he was like, I'm not trying to tell you I'm gonna go, but you need to know like I'm a desired commodity and I'm not gonna be the quiet bystander anymore. I think he stays at least one more year. Could I see him get traded next year? Yeah, I could see that. I mean, now it's coming out more about they thought about trading him to Cleveland a couple of years back when they took Joe Burrow. There was calls made.
Interesting.
Not Joe Burrow. When they took Baker Mayfield. When Baker was the number one pick, there was phone calls made. I think he's just sort of he's using some leverage, and I don't blame him. If you look at how hot his career started out, and then really we talked about in the QB ratings just how consistent and great he's been throughout his career.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's making a legacy push at this point. Try to get an MVP. Try to get another Super Bowl, which I don't blame him. And I think that he's kind of pining just so that they know. And could he get traded next year? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise, especially if the Seahawks underperform. I could definitely see it happening. But I think at least for 2021, I think he's a Hawk again for another year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Russ gets traded. I mean, I heard from what I'm hearing, people keep saying the Bears would be the best fit for him because their line is getting better and that offense fits him well. But yeah, I don't see Russ leaving Seattle, and it's something I never really thought about because I always viewed him as this really super humble, super genuine, laid back kind of personality. And Tim was saying last episode how this is him saying, "Don't forget, this is my show." Essentially, like, I'm the reason this team's so successful. You take me out of the equation, you still have a great team, but it doesn't. You need the conductor to run the train. So, I think I like how he's doing it. He's not like out here calling teammates out, and I mean, besides some of his linemen, but
yeah,
he's letting it be known that
he kind of call out the linemen.
Yeah, he's just letting it know and be like, look, I get sacked. This is arguably the highest in the league every year. Give me some damn help, and then let me cook with my top 5 wide receiver group. So
yeah, and and I will say a little plug for Russell Wilson, one of my favorite guys in the NFL. He, it's a known thing that quarterbacks always get their linemen gifts. It's usually a Rolex, a watch, a fancy dinner. You know what he got his lineman last year?
Is it a car?
It was Amazon stock.
Oh.
He bought them Amazon stock, which if they kept it, they've been doing very well.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Yeah, the Walter Payton Man of the Year. If you didn't watch that speech, you should watch it.
What year was that from?
This year.
Oh,
he just won it.
I forgot he won this year.
Just for 2020.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I think it's entertaining that this is like, to me, this whole offseason already has been insane. The amount of quarterback rumors that we've heard. I don't remember ever seeing this much change.
Well, if you remember, I mean, me and you were talking about it when we were doing the rankings. They're just saying this. I've never seen the market so saturated for quarterbacks before.
Yeah.
Like I've never seen so many guys who could get playing time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and that's why I said it doesn't make sense to me for teams who reach in the draft, who get rid of assets when they don't need to do it, to overpay somebody. There's so many guys who can start for you, and so many teams who have multiple needs. You know, and the reality is the top 5 guys are all pretty locked in their situations, except Russ is a little bit, you know, he's playing with a little bit, but everybody else pretty much, the elite quarterbacks,
Yeah.
you know, they're pretty much going to be staying where they are. And
Yeah.
the rest of them, you know, it's quarterback's a tricky thing because as we were going through looking at the starters, I'm just like, yeah, after about the top 10 guys, like, I don't think there's much of a net change between number 13 and number 24.
Yeah.
Like, I don't overall feel moved. You know, I'm like, yeah, this team would get better, but like how much better and like at what cost?
Right. Yeah, I think it's something that I mean, this is a topic we could get into on a whole different episode. But I was listening to something the other day about how they were saying the NBA, where it's at right now, has the most talent it's ever had, like as far as like players who can shoot, players who can charge in the paint, players who can defend. Like you take that group of athletes in 2021 against, you know, the 90s athletes, like it's almost not comparable how much talent there is. And it's a lot to do with training and what, you know, technology that helps these athletes stay healthy and build muscle and all. But it's the same thing with quarterbacks. I feel like you can find a serviceable quarterback in this year. Like you back in like 10 years ago, you had to have a bona fide starter. You weren't going to really, unless you had an absolute monster of a defense, you know, you needed a quarterback to get you deep in the playoffs. But time and time again, we see, you know, we had, who was it out in Jacksonville, had a great defense, took the Jaguars AFC Championship. Yeah, Blake Bortles. Like, so it's a weird parody of people who are just really talented and able to get it done at the bare minimum. So, that being said, I think about this whole QB carousel, the Rams now become very interesting because of who their quarterback should be starting, Matt Stafford.
Yeah.
I still like Seattle, but the Niners are getting healthy, and we'll touch on their quarterback in a bit. And the Cardinals need to win. So I actually think the Rams might come up top in this division as that, you know, take that number 1 spot. And then we have like Seattle or Cardinals and Arizona, or excuse me, Cardinals and Niners fight out for wild card spots. But I mean, I would assume you have Matt Stafford as a Rams QB.
Yeah, I would hope so after what you gave up to get him.
Yeah. So Matt Stafford in LA, and then Arizona, I would assume Kyler Murray is getting the go.
Yeah.
And then this is where I think the Niners, I think they trade Jimmy G or cut him, and he goes to a different team. And I think that the Jets trade Sam Darnold to San Francisco.
Okay.
I think Darnold is a slight upgrade over Jimmy G. He's younger, he's cheaper. And I think they can let him kind of brew in that system, you know, over the offseason, let him play out through the season, see how it does. If he doesn't improve, you know, help them out. I mean, Jimmy G got them to a Super Bowl, and I don't think super high of Jimmy G. But, you know, see where Sam Darnold can take you. And if not, that's a lot of thing with a lot of these trades. Is like you can have quarterbacks come into your system, see how they do. And next year's draft isn't great for quarterbacks, but as we see in college sports all the time, players come out of nowhere. There will be a couple quarterbacks that come out of nowhere, and then they'll rise up the ranks. So ultimately, I see, like I said, Sam Darnold's either going to go to Washington or 49ers in my eyes, and I think the Niners will pull the trigger because Desean Watson won't be going there.
So I think based on the comments that the Niners have made, it's pretty obvious that Jimmy G is walking out the door. I think the whole, like, he's a 49er right now. I think that's been front office speak for, like, we're trying to move him. You know, it's a tough situation there because you have a defense that's primed to win. You know, you got a great defense, but you're in an extremely challenging division.
Mm-hmm.
You have some threats on offense. I think you kind of got to say, like, do we go all in? Do we push the chips in? Do we think our window's 2 years from now? Because we got a lot of young guys on defense. So I'm kind of between two moves for them. I see them either making a trade for Kirk Cousins. I could see them luring him away from Minnesota.
I thought about
that. Or trading up in the draft and taking Mac Jones.
that.
They're not going to get high. I think they can move into, that if he falls to 12, 13, move into that, give up a little bit of future draft capital if they fall in love with him. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard there because you can go young-ish, or you can go, a little bit of a more proven commodity. I lean Cousins because I think they're going to go somewhere more proven. Something about me just does not like Kirk Cousins, but I can't deny that he's a definite upgrade over Jimmy G at quarterback. I think they probably feel like they have a better chance to compete in their division with an upgrade there. Personally, I think Jimmy G is like a bottom 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think Kirk Cousins is more towards that 12, 13, 14 spot. I think he gives them just enough to get over the hump. So I'm going to say they make a move and get Kirk Cousins.
Okay. So Niners for me, Sam Darnold, Niners for Nick. Kirk Cousins, interesting. I could see it. I was looking into that too because I actually have a question mark next to the Vikings player I have listed because I really don't know what Kirk Cousins' future holds. So we'll see. But moving on to the NFC North, who do you have the Bears as their quarterback?
This was another tough one, QB carousel action.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could be in the Darnold sweepstakes. I could see them making a play there. I don't see Desean Watson ending up there. I think the Bears are too bad of a franchise to pull something off like that.
Yeah.
I don't see Russ going there, even though there's the rumors. Maybe next year, but not this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with a little bit of a surprise here. So partially, I'm thinking through the Bears front office. The Bears front office is in a really weird spot. They can't go super young and draft a rookie because they could all lose their jobs. They're like very much on one of the hottest seats in the NFL with Matt Nagy, the GM. But I think that they can't really afford a marquee name, and I don't think their situation really brings one in. I'm going to go with the guy who tried to take a year to repair himself, but I think still has an opportunity to compete for a starting job in this league. And I think that the writing on the wall for his current situation is not for him to start. So I'm going to go with Jameis Winston, make them move to Chicago.
See, I like that. I could see it. I think I'm not as high on Winston as other people. The inconsistency for me is like just because he spent a year in New Orleans under Hall of Famer Drew Brees doesn't mean he's going to immediately be better. He did play well when he had to, but I have an interesting Bears quarterback choice too. He's a little older. He's been around the block. So I have the Bears in September of 2021. Their QB1 will be Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Oh, that was mine. Oh, I almost went with that one.
Ryan Fitzpatrick will be playing on his 69th team.
I almost went that for Fitzmagic.
I had that blank, and I wrote in. I was just staring at it, and I'm like, who's going to be the Bears quarterback? It's like they don't have any room to really move up in the draft. It's not really going to be anyone there for them. I was like, maybe they take a QB late in like the third or the fourth and bring in a veteran. I was like, who would they bring in? And then my hand just wrote Fitzmagic. So I don't know. I could see it.
Yeah. That was one of my other ones too. I could definitely see.
Well, that. You started speaking as if it might be, and I was like, I swear, if he steals my thunder on the Fitzmagic.
No, that was my initial thing, but then I was like, I just try to like get like a little deeper into like where they would be, who they could buy low because they can't afford to make a big investment and swing and miss. And Jameis isn't going to cost them much if they feel like they can. Get a former first overall pick to play semi-decent and they can buy him low on maybe like a 2-year cheapish deal, I think that at least sways the Bears to feel a little bit like, well, we got a number 1 overall pick at a cheap cost.
Yeah.
It's a shot in the dark, but I could see it happening.
I'll throw you a quick question. Where does Trubisky end up?
I don't think it matters because I think he ends up as a backup. I don't think he actually ends up competing anywhere. There's not any other starter in the NFL I really think he has a chance of unseating. I haven't liked, and to be honest, I haven't liked him since what they saw at UNC, that they thought that he was a number 2 overall pick. Even though he had that 1 year he made the Pro Bowl, I don't think he's a starting NFL quarterback. I think he's a backup. So I don't know. Maybe the Niners I could see.
Yeah, I kind of looked at that as I don't think he's going back to Chicago. And so. I think a spot for him that would be good is a team that has to give up capital to move and draft a player, or just drafts a quarterback at whatever position they're at. Maybe the Jets have him come in as, a veteran, just kind of help groom a guy who will be starting. I agree with you. I could see him going to a backup role. I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up playing a couple of games, but I don't. He's a weird guy. He shows flashes here and there, but it's never super consistent. So.
Yeah, and honestly, I thought early in his career he actually had weapons too. Like when he first got to Chicago, I thought they actually, that offense, it wasn't, now it's not, setting the world on fire, but it wasn't like he wasn't put into Sam Darnold's shoes. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, Sam Darnold gets a bad rep, but he's had, not a good line really. No, not a single running back you can name off the top of your head. No wide, just Robbie Anderson left. No wide receivers.
Yep.
His tight ends are okay. And he's had a different. I'm pretty sure they keep changing the offensive system for him. So, I don't know. I think Sam could actually thrive on a different team. And if I was the Jets, I think it's good for both parties to kind of like the Carson thing. Get a fresh start. You get you have a new system, a new coach coming in. Get a new quarterback. Let them gel together. Let Sam work in another organization. So. Couple of easy ones here. So Lions, unless something drastic happens, I would say Jared Goff is a starting quarterback.
Right.
Which isn't, I expect them to play just as they normally do. It would be middle of the pack, below middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, I would assume.
Yeah.
And then the Vikings. This is where I wrote in Kirk Cousins with a question mark. And I think I'll stay with Kirk Cousins. I could 100% see next season there be a QB move, or they could draft a QB in the second round this year and then, have him take over next year or have him take over middle of the season. But I think there's enough quarterbacks in the draft, enough quarterbacks available and to be had in trades in the market that Kirk stays. But I think Kirk Cousins will be the Vikings QB still.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm about 45% there, but because I have the Cousins trade, I'll have to go with Jimmy G getting swapped in the trade. So by default, only by default, I have Jimmy G being their starter. It wouldn't shock me if they do stick with Kirk Cousins. I think absolutely they take a quarterback in the second or third round that they really, that they covet. It wouldn't surprise me if they, either take it with their first, second round pick or trade up, after that to get a guy that they've pegged and really try to see what they can get there.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in a young guy to try to move on. I don't feel like they're super tied to him. Even though they gave him that big contract when he came there, I think it's been kind of underwhelming when you think of the receivers he's had. Look at what Stephon Diggs did in Buffalo. Adam Thielen has been amazing. Justin Jefferson, individually has looked amazing. But it hasn't translated to wins. I think at some point I think you always and this is tough because I think quarterbacks get more credit than they deserve, and I think they get more criticism than they deserve. And I'll always stand by that. I think that wins are not always a fair QB stat, but I think there's an intangible that he just doesn't have. And I think that with this amount of time and the Vikings they haven't really moved. They've just been sort of ruddering in the same spot. And they have a stud in Dalvin Cook, stud duo receivers with Jefferson and Thielen. I think they make a move. It may not be the sexy move, but I think they make a move to try to shake it up and get some new blood in there.
And so one player that really does not make it, like, it doesn't seem like he would ever be traded here, but crossed my mind was Desean Watson. Could you imagine Desean Watson with Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen and all? Like, I don't see it happening, but I thought about it for like a second, and I think that would make the Vikings a very strong competitor against Green Bay for that division. But no, I agree. The Vikings are a weird team. They're like strong in certain areas, weak in other, and Kirk Cousins is the like peak of inconsistency at QB. Like some games he'll go out and throw 5 touchdowns, 600 yards, whatever, and then some games have 50 yards and 8 interceptions. It doesn't make sense. And
here's the thing for me is sometimes he has these stats that look great, but the team still, it's weird. Like he'll put, and then he's like, if you watch a Kirk Cousins game, you'll see the stats at the end, and you're like, oh wow, he did that well. It's like you're always surprised, you know. It never looks like. And I think part of that is just some of the receiver play he has. You know, Dalvin Cook takes a screen 70 yards. Justin Jefferson catches a 10-yard pass that he takes for 50. You know, like some of it I think has been the talent around him has made him look better than he is. But there's just something about him that just makes me feel like he's just an average NFL starter. He's not below average. He's not above average. He's just kind of like in that weird middle of the pack.
15, 14.
Yeah, like, you know, he's right around there. He's better than most, but he's not near, like, he's a tier below those fringe top 10 guys.
Yeah, and I mean, he's kind of been the same since when he was like, it's like how you said, like, even when he was in Washington, you know, had all these great numbers, was obviously a hot commodity. Everyone, you know, the teams were interested in him. Washington had a franchise tag him twice. But it's not like Washington was out here plowing people, winning games. So he's an interesting quarterback. He definitely has talent. It's just a matter of keeping it together. So that wraps up the North. So the final NFC, we have the South, starting with the Bucs. I would assume is Tom Brady.
Yeah,
the GOAT himself. And then the rest is kind of a question mark. I mean, we'll start with the Falcons. I think the Falcons will draft a quarterback with their first round pick. Let him sit under Matt Ryan. Let Matt Ryan start, finish the year, honor him, let him finish out his contract, let him walk and choose whatever team he wants. Because that's the kind of vibe I'm getting from them. They seem to really try to respect their players. So let Matt Ryan finish out the year, but Matt Ryan will start, but they will draft a quarterback. That's my take.
I mean, ditto. I feel the exact same way. I mean, he's not really going to bring you back anything in a trade with his contract and his age. So I think, you know, and I think because he won the MVP there, he brought him to the Super Bowl. I think he gets to sort of like his goodbye tour. You know, they'll draft a guy, you know, probably like a Trey Lance, and he'll groom him for a year and then he'll move on. But I think week 1, you know, he's the starter. If he doesn't start week 12 because they're clearly not going to the playoffs and they want to get Trey Lance games, doesn't surprise me. If he gets hurt with his age, doesn't surprise me. But week 1 going into the season, I think Matty Ice with his farewell tour from the Falcons.
I agree. So you had Teddy Bridgewater going to the Bears, correct? Or not Teddy Bridgewater, sorry, Jameis Winston.
No, Jameis Winston going.
Yeah. So who do you have as the Saints starting quarterback?
week one.
Mm-hmm.
Week one. Now, I don't think at all, and this is why I asked you before, I don't think he starts the whole season.
Okay.
But I think with the financial investment, Taysom Hill starts week one for the New Orleans Saints. I
Okay.
think somebody comes in. It also wouldn't surprise me if Jameis stays and competes for the job. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think if he doesn't go to a Chicago Bears or possibly the Panthers, I think that is the most likely thing is that he tries to battle. But I think they're just so much more financially invested in Taysom Hill. And as we saw when Drew Brees went out, that's the way they went. They gave Taysom Hill the benefit of the doubt. I see week one, Taysom Hill being the starter, but I won't be surprised if you see Jameis sign another 1-year deal to compete in, preseason with him. Again, they're not in a spot to draft a guy. They're not in a place where they can move up and take somebody. So I think with the investment they've made, they paid Taysom a good amount of money for a guy who's kind of like a play all over. For you, it's like in baseball, you have your utility guy. It's kind of Taysom Hill. But I think he gets the chance. Personally, I don't see it. I don't necessarily see what Sean Payton sees in this doing it, but the way he's kind of made decisions, it feels like that's the way he's going to go to start the year.
I could see that. I had the Saints blank for a while, and I thought really hard about it. And I thought about who this guy is as a player, what he means to this team, this city, what I've seen him doing lately. I think Drew Brees comes back. He hasn't announced his retirement yet. I think he's like, you know what? I'm going to get my body really, really right for this year, and I'm just going to go out, give it my all one more time, and see what happens. He could be a throw of ducks again, or he could be phenomenal. You never know. But I think the Saints are kind of in a weird spot where they're kind of unsure where their quarterback future is, and I think Brees will come in and just give him one more year to think about it. But and then the last team in the NFC is the very trade rumored Carolina Panthers, who apparently hate Teddy Bridgewater. I'll let you go first. Where do you think they go in the draft? Do you think they draft a guy? Do they bring a guy in? Who's QB1 September 2021?
So this is a tough one. There's 3 scenarios I can see playing out. And I'm going to preface this by saying the scenario that I think would be best for this team won't happen. Mm-hmm. And that's a Cam Newton homecoming. Because I think the way they treated him on the way out, releasing him so late, not doing it, I think the way that they just kind of and he talks about it, they decided they were moving on from me.
Yeah.
I think he's too prideful to go back. And I don't blame him with the way that they put him in a bad position. They waited so long to get rid of him. It killed his free agency opportunities. He had one call, and that was the Pats. He'd take a minimum deal. So I don't see him doing it. But as much as they've down, the media and they aren't committing to Bridgewater, they did make a pretty big financial commitment to him. Mm-hmm. I think they stick with him week one, but they draft Justin Fields. I think that they bring in Fields. I don't think Fields is a week one starter. I think they start the year with Bridgewater, and Fields is kind of waiting in the wings. Maybe week 9, week 10, he gets the start, and then they move on from Bridgewater next season, or they trade him at the deadline and just go full boat on Fields and trade him to a team who has a quarterback who gets hurt, or they make a move for Jimmy Garoppolo. And they trade to the Niners make a move and they bring him in. That's sort of my third. But I wish Cam could have a homecoming, because I think with this offense, especially with Christian McCaffrey, I mean, giving him Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, some of the weapons, they have a receiver, get him one more piece, what Robbie Anderson's been doing down there. I would love to see it, but I can't see him going back to Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, I love Cam, but at this point in his career, and with some health issues here and there, I don't know how much of an upgrade he is over Bridgewater. I So I'm in the same boat as you. I think they'll draft Justin Fields, mostly because I think the Falcons draft Trey Lance. I think he goes ahead of Fields. Um, but I think that the Panthers are in a situation where they Justin Fields, if I drafted him, if I was a general manager, I would want him to sit for a year. That's kind of always how I view quarterbacks coming out of the draft. Let them sit behind a veteran, kind of learn the system, get a feel for the league. I think the Panthers don't get, the Desean Watson or any of that, but they do get something in return for Bridgewater and then run with Justin Fields day one as their quarterback and say, you know what? We have McCaffrey. We're going to give him the ball a ton, and we're going to hope that you develop super quick and, give us some leadership, show us some spicy plays. But I think we're past the NFL where the quarterback would sit for a couple years. This is like you said, past episodes. It's a what have you done for me lately league. So I feel like quarterbacks are expected to if you get drafted in the top 3 rounds, you'll almost always be expected to at least put in some form of, a mindset that you're going to start day one. So that's how I would roll with this situation. Any last thoughts on the NFC before we move on?
No, I mean, I think there's a couple moving pieces there. Obviously, I think the Niners situation and the Panthers situation are two I feel like the most uncertain about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Saints, we'll see if Drew Brees comes back, but they're in worse cap space than the Eagles, which is hard to imagine.
Yeah.
So it's not like they can get anybody this year. They're kind of stuck with who's already in that locker room. So we'll see. Lots of moving pieces. I mean, one big trade can change all of these dynamics. So.
Oh, absolutely. So going from the NFC North, we're going to flip sides to the NFC North to, NFC South to the AFC South. Let's start with the big man, Desean Watson, Houston Texans. Who is the Houston Texans quarterback in 2021?
So I think that because I already said I see a trade happening, I see Desean getting traded. I see him being traded for the number 2 pick and Zach Wilson being the player that they take at number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Or I see them also as a potential Sam Darnold landing spot and acquiring Darnold and picks and giving Darnold an opportunity and using that number 2 pick to either get more picks or to take a Penny Sewell and get a top offensive tackle.
Yeah, the more I look at it, the more the Jets to me are actually super appealing for Desean Watson. But this is the Texans, and from what I'm understanding is they do not want to get rid of Desean Watson, and I know he doesn't want to play there, which is definitely going to impact things. But I really don't see a way that Houston's like, you know what, we lost Watt, we got rid of Hopkins, someone has to be our player, and I feel like I don't think they're going to give him up. I really don't. So I have Desean Watson, whether he walks into the office or not, as the QB1 for the Texans.
Really? Week 1, huh?
Yeah.
I think if you look at the total amount of picks the Jets have this year and next year, I mean, they have, I think it's something like 7 or 8 day 1 and day 2 picks over this draft and next year. I mean, they're kind of primed. They're the market who could use a guy like him to just throw an offer at them that it's so hard to, especially with the number 2 pick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if they have like the number 15 or 20, you're like, but knowing they have the number 2 pick where you can get anybody other than Trevor Lawrence, or you could trade and get multiple that you could get, I think the Texans have so many holes, they have so many needs. And while I am one of the biggest Watson fans, I've supported him since his freshman year at Clemson. If you're the Texans, honestly, might be a blessing in disguise If
Mm-hmm.
you look at, if you can get some king's ransom record-breaking trade from the New York Jets, who are just trying to give that fan base something to get excited about,
Yeah.
you can get 3 first-rounders, a second-rounder, their quarterback, or something, and you think you can turn Sam Darnold into a starter, or you think Zach Wilson is going to be the next guy, plus multiple high draft picks.
Mm.
I don't see you bring back a guy who just clearly hates your organization. He is just clearly so like disgruntled employees. We talk about this all the time. Culture is so important.
Oh yeah.
And Desean is a guy who's been the ultimate class worker everywhere he's been. And he's so sick of your franchise. And when that owner said, you can't let the inmates run the prison with a quarterback who's as socially conscious as Desean Watson is, I was surprised he didn't demand a trade then.
Yeah.
And now you kind of just broke the camel's back with his GM search, with not giving Bieniemy an interview when he wanted, telling him he was going to be a part of the process, leaving him out. I can't see it. And to be honest, I don't see why you would force the issue for them at this point anyways.
I think the best thing for both parties is to move on. I think Desean should be traded. I just think that Houston is at this point where, they've put too much gasoline in the fire and they can't figure out how to stop it. So it's just going to keep burning until somehow they get, maybe he'll play out this year and then move on after that. But I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if he was just still starting for this team. So, speaking of, can't believe he's starting for this team. Indianapolis Colts, Carson Wentz, still hurts to say. But yeah, he should be their QB1. I don't see any reason why not.
He won't be wearing number 11 though.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe 10. I don't know what he would wear. Jaguars. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback that, typically number 1 overall picks start day 1 anyways, but he's a quarterback that's right. It's not like Justin Fields where like he played two seasons or 3 seasons. Trevor Lawrence has been playing college ball for a while now, so he's ready for the NFL. I hope he does well. I think him and Tua were 2 of my favorite quarterbacks to watch over these past few years. As far as college goes, I think both of them are super talented. So Trevor Lawrence for the Jags.
And ironically, Trevor Lawrence broke all of Desean Watson's high school records in Georgia and then followed him to Clemson and won a national championship as a true freshman. So kind of crazy how parallel, their careers have been.
And then finally we have the Titans. Ryan Tannehill balls out for, he does his job well. I don't know how, if they're super comfortable with him, I could see him going for another year or 2. It doesn't seem like a pressing need when you have King Henry running the show, but that's the South's pretty set beyond the Texans.
Yeah.
As is the AFC North. I have all the same starters. Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Bengals, Joe Burrow, Browns, Baker Mayfield. I did actually think about it. There, I would not be. I think it's like 90% sure he'll be the starter, but 10% of me thinks he could be traded. You never know.
I thought this was the make or break year for Baker. I thought this year was the make or break. And I think after leading him to the playoffs and beating a division rival in the Steelers in the playoffs, I just don't see how you could move on from him. He's a very polarizing player. People either love him or hate him. Personally, I love the fact that he walked on at 2 different schools, multiple time Heisman finalist. I think that I just love that guy who just has this fire about him. He came into a situation this year where I think he had to prove it. I think he has a lot of the Tannehill type things where he leans on that run game, but he does just enough not to lose you games, which is how I feel about Tannehill. I don't think that he wins you games,
right?
But I think he's a game manager. He makes enough throws. I think Baker makes enough throws. As we saw in the Eagles game, he also misses some throws that make you go, dude, how do you miss that? But I like his intangibles enough that I think he deserves to stay there. Not many teams have 2 top 10 running backs. So, I mean, they don't really have to worry too much about the quarterback position.
Yeah. So yeah, Browns, Ravens, Bengals all set. Steelers,
Yeah.
they just re-signed Big Ben for another year. So I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see them either take QB round 2 to 5. But Big Ben will be their starter in my eyes for at least one more year.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately, they're sort of stuck with it, right? What do you
Yeah.
do? You hand over to Mason Rudolph, like they're in a position where, as much as I mean, he's a statue and he can't move and he's a shell of himself. That wide receiver core is so good and so young that honestly, I don't think it's the worst thing to just give him one more year so you can try to figure out what you're going to do with the QB. Try to take a guy in the second, third round that you think, can grow over the year. But those wide receivers that's a fast group. I mean, even with Juju leaving, they obviously aren't going to be able to afford him.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many guys on that group that you would love to have on your roster.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not sure where. I mean, they have a plethora of wide receivers, so they're kind of in a luxury there. So Juju will walk. Not sure really where he will go. I can see maybe the Jags or the Jets.
I think he's gonna be a Raider.
A Raider, I could see that.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be a Raider.
So moving on to the AFC West, and speaking of the Raiders, or Las Vegas Raiders, I almost said Oakland. I thought about this one for a while, but Derek Carr has been rumored to be in trade talks for like his entire career, and he's still a Raider. So I'm gonna roll with Derek Carr as the starter day one.
Yeah, I mean, if Gruden was going to move on from him, it would have been when he came to town.
Yeah.
And I thought that when he came to town, that was it. I thought he was going to bring in his guy. He had draft capital. He had the opportunity to do it. And he didn't do it. So I think, Carr's shown you enough to continue to be the starter. I'm not his biggest fan. But again, I think he's done enough that he'll keep his job, for at least another year.
Yeah. Chargers, Justin Herbert, obviously.
Who's losing his guard, by the way. They're actively shopping Trey Turner.
Interesting.
A little surprising. Young quarterback. They have a Pro Bowl guard that they're actively shopping. Don't know if I'm him, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, especially, because we had just said Joe Burrow with the Bengals, and his line is atrocious. And hopefully they take Sewell at number 5, I think they pick.
Yeah.
Because he desperately needs help. I would assume they would bring in one of the top offensive line free agents as well. But yeah, for the Chargers to be shopping around, that's not a good look. I will say for Herbert, he played a little higher than I expected this past year. And that class overall, like it's not super common to see all of the top quarterbacks taken play well.
Yeah.
And they all played well. So it'll be interesting to see how Herbert and Tua and the rest of them all develop. But another shocker for you, I think Pat Mahomes will be the Chiefs quarterback.
Wow.
Yeah, breaking news.
He only has a 75-year contract. I'm surprised.
And so this one I had a lot of thinking as well. I'll let you go first as the resident Broncos fan. Who's their QB1?
So this is where the pain comes in because I've seen so many mock drafts of them taking Trey Lance. I really don't want to see it. Personally, week 1, give me one more evaluation year of Drew Lock. He started 16 games. He's been in and out because of injury. He's got young wide receivers. His number 1 wide receiver was out. Then he had a rookie wide receiver last year. Give him the offseason. It's not like you're going to compete with the Chiefs anyways. So, let's not try to go into this win now mode where we're sacrificing young, cheap quarterbacks. Lock wasn't even a first-round pick, so he was a second-round guy. So it's not like you're paying him much. Get some other pieces around him. They just franchise tag Justin Simmons again. Get him a contract. Figure out some other pieces. I hope they give Drew Lock one more year. I would have been on board if they traded for Wentz. I would have taken that. I would have been on board for Stafford.
Mm-hmm.
Once the two of them went, it was give Lock another year. I mean, again, he's shown you flashes. He's also shown you, bad. He was the only person who had a worse completion percentage from a clean pocket than Carson Wentz last year. Fun stat. He's the only quarterback in the NFL who was more inaccurate. But I think a lot of that's to do with timing. He missed a lot of time. His number one safety security blanket wasn't there. The other guy was a rookie wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tim Patrick played out of his mind. He's done nothing until this year. So that showed. Usually when a guy comes out of nowhere to put up numbers like that, it just tells you that there's an issue there. So I want one more year out of Drew Lock. I don't love the guy, but I'm not let's move on to the next shiny toy. It hasn't worked out for Denver. They're not in a position that I don't see Trey Lance as really the solution for them. So I hope they give Lock another year.
Yeah, I was looking at that too, and ultimately came to pretty much the same conclusion. However, I also looked at this as the kind of what I gave Washington for a QB situation. So I think Lock will be day one starter, but I think he'll be on a tight leash. And the Broncos will look to bring in a veteran to kind of push him even further. So I have a Drew Lock / Andy Dalton quarterback. So I think if Lock struggles by week 3 and he's still not doing, hasn't progressed at all, or they're 0-3 or whatever it be, you start to see Andy Dalton come in, and then we'll see a back and forth of that. But that would be my pick. And then finally, the AFC East. And as we go through this, I'm noticing we just flew by the AFC. So the NFC has a lot of quarterback questions.
Yeah.
But we'll start with the obvious one. So the Buffalo Bills will be Josh Allen, I would assume. I know there was some flirtation with Desean Watson, but I believe Tua will still be the Dolphins quarterback day one. Any arguments there?
No, I think he's still going to be there.
And then this is where I think the Patriots, I would not be shocked to see Cam go back there, but I think Patriots oftentimes will let players go or trade them away, and they'll bring them back for a second time. So I think Jimmy G ends up back in New England. It's a good spot for him. It's a good spot for the Patriots. So that's who I think they'll ride with.
So Jimmy G returning is my second thought for the Patriots. It wouldn't surprise me. Bill Belichick is the king of trading a day 3 pick for a guy you can actually use.
Yeah.
That team has so many holes. They're getting a lot of their defensive starters back who opted out for COVID, which is big.
Yeah.
The wide receiver core is still just atrocious. They
historically bad.
Oh, it's terrible. And they have 75 running backs who are all one-trick ponies. But they rotate them well.
They're all scat backs.
Never take a Patriots running back in fantasy. It will be the worst mistake you ever make. But I think considering if you take all the factors together, Cam showed up late, way new system late, trying to learn the Patriot way on the fly during a year where you're doing virtual meetings, during a year where you have all this stuff going on. He came out on fire. They looked great. People forget about this, how they finished. Mm-hmm. He looked fantastic early on. 75 rushing yards week 1. Like, he looks awesome. Gets COVID, misses 2 weeks. Completely throws him off, and he never looked the same after that. Didn't get the full off season. I think he gets the full off season. I think he comes back in. He'll come back on a cheap deal because it's the Patriots. They'll get him on a 1-year, $3-4 million contract. I think he comes back. I think he has something to prove there. He's such a prideful guy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see this being like I came in here and it was not successful and I'm just going to leave. I also don't see really much of a great opportunity for him somewhere else, and that might also just come down to what it is. Like, I don't know where else he makes sense. I would have loved him in Carolina, but I don't see him go back there.
Yeah.
He could go to Washington, but I see him trying to figure it out. If there's one thing that I feel about Cam Newton is that he really cares about being the best that he can be. And I think that getting a taste of what it was like to work in an organization like New England, to be with Belichick, to be with Josh McDaniels, who, while Josh McDaniels I don't think will ever be a good head coach, I think that he is a great offensive mind. So I think he does another year in New England. I think he has a good year. The problem that's going to happen is he has no help. He has no receivers. And honestly, I think that will get used against him, and this will be his last year in New England. But week 1 of 2021, I think Cam takes a snap.
I can see that. And I think, New England's usually not big spenders, but they have money. I think they bring in one of the top 5 receivers in this free agent class, maybe Galladay, or I don't see Allen Robinson, but I think someone will fit in there, give that quarterback some help. I will say on Cam, like I said, I like Cam a lot. And then after listening to him on the I Am Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall and Ocho, it shows how humble he is. Like, they were talking about Russell Wilson and stuff and comparing him to him. And he's like, I'm not at that level right now. Like, I need to get myself right. I need to, I'm not playing to my highest level that I know I can play. And, I don't want to say he's running out of time, but matter of fact is that he's older now. So he has to make the most of his opportunities. So I definitely could see another 1 year back to New England for him. And as much as I'm not a huge fan of the Patriots, I would love to see Cam do well with them and thrive in that system. So, and then the last thing we got, the New York Jets. Nick, I think you alluded to already. So who's your quarterback?
So I think that the Jets make a king's ransom offer for Deshaun. I think he comes in, he starts for them. I think with the market, with him wanting to be there, them knowing he wants to be there, the Jets owner going, man, we could market him like crazy. I would make all them, they haven't had anything to be excited for. They thought that Sam Darnold was going to bring excitement to New York. That was supposed to be the thing, and that clearly hasn't panned out. I see that being the piece. If they don't go Desean Watson, and that isn't what happens, I see Zach Wilson being who they take at number 2, and I see them then trading Darnold and moving on. And then if all else fails and they decide to trade back, which I feel about 20% likely, they'll take that number 2 pick. They'll trade back for somebody else who wants Zach Wilson. They'll get Darnold something, and they'll roll with him as the starter. But I put that at about 20%. I put Deshaun at about 50%, and I put Zach Wilson at about 30%.
Yeah, so in my scenario, they trade Darnold to the Niners, and then the Jets draft Zach Wilson. Like I said, you draft a quarterback top 5 nowadays, or even top 10, he's going to start day 1. So I think Zach Wilson will be the Jets quarterback in September 2021. Speaking on Desean Watson, to kind of finish out this episode, I do think, if I had to say top 3 most likely spots, I think New York would be number 1. Then I would honestly go Denver, and then I would go San Francisco. But as of right now, I really just don't see him getting traded. I feel like the cards aren't there, but you never know. Never know.
I mean, I feel like I feel like they're just completely toxic.
Oh yeah.
I feel like the situation is just toxic. I feel like, you got fleeced in the DeAndre Hopkins trade. You got fleeced in the Laramie Tunsil trade.
Uh-huh.
You just let a 3-time face of your 3-time defensive player of the year, face of your franchise, walk for nothing in return. You have to get something back. You cannot lose this amount of pieces, star pieces, and get a David Johnson and a second rounder back in return. You can't go from a team who was that high with that many marquee guys. And Deshaun almost fixes a lot of those mistakes. You get back multiple first-round picks probably multiple second-round picks.
Yeah.
And you got nothing for anybody else. I don't see, if you're the Texans, how you can have that opportunity, because they're not going to win now anyways. They're not going to win anytime soon. So why you would keep such a disgruntled employee? Because here's the worst case scenario. You bring him back and he doesn't care and he doesn't want to be there. He poisons your locker room because his energy's not there. Players get resentful, or you just look terrible. And then what's going to happen? Then you get forced to trade him, and you get 1 second-round pick because teams know you have to move on. At least right now, the Jets will sell you at the farm because they're like, you know what? It's before. If you wait and you play this out, what's going to happen when you go 1-3 in the first 4 games? You're not going to get anything. You're going to get a sack of potatoes back for them.
I agree.
So you've already done that for too many big-name guys. You have to recoup something back. I can't see him taking another stab as a Texan. I can't see it happening. I really can't.
I also think what they do in free agency is going to be huge. If they can bring in some pieces to kind of, somewhat quarrel this and make him at least like bring back Will Fuller. They already re-signed, David Johnson, maybe bring in a lineman. If you can help at least support him because he was supposed to get, some, I don't want to say administrative, but he was supposed to get some say in who they're going to draft and who they're going to bring in. Because at the end of the day, the quarterback, he's driving the train. If you can't get pieces that he wants, can't get staff that he wants on that train, like it's not going to work. It's going to derail like it is right now. So it'll be, I feel like it's more toxic than the Carson thing at this point. And we say, oh, that ended. So that is the biggest piece. Desean Watson is the biggest piece to the draft, free agency. So he'll change a lot of things, but we'll see. We'll see. I think overall, like we were kind of talking about, there's going to be a lot of movement this year. The fact that, what was it? There's no starting quarterbacks from the
16, 17 drafts. Teams.
On the original teams. That blows my mind. Like that's because you even look at it like, because it's Goff and Wentz were 1 and 2. I don't think anyone saw them not being long term with their teams.
And Winston Mariota the year before.
Yeah.
1-2.
That's crazy.
And that's why I talk about, like, I don't see why people trade up in the drafts to reach for quarterbacks. We've seen time and time and time again these guys who go in the top 5 who don't stay on that team. It happens all the time. Take the proven commodities. Mm-hmm. That's why if you're the Jets, as nice as the number 2 pick is, and you think Zach Wilson's going to be better than Justin Fields and Trey Lance, you know what Desean Watson is. You know what you're getting back. And while first-round picks are nice, and they're, but it's all probability. Okay, you have a 70% chance. You have a 60% chance. Give me the guaranteed. The quarterback that you are getting. Yeah. Zach Wilson wasn't even voted a captain at BYU. He wore a C on his chest because he was on the leadership council. When you're the quarterback who's not even voted a captain in a high-profile position like that, what does that tell me about your intangibles? I always go back to the intangibles with the quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to talk about arm strength and accuracy and this. And while that's important, I also was a big Peyton Manning fan, and I watched him throw ducks for years. Yeah. But he knew where to put the ball. So it was like he didn't have good arm strength. He never threw a spiral ever. Every ball he threw was wobbly. But he had great pre-snap reads. He knew how to digest football better, I think, than any other quarterback I ever saw play the position. And he was a great leader. Those aren't pieces that show up in the Madden 99 arm strength. They don't show up but he knew what to do. He knew how to play the position. You knew what you were going to get. If I'm the Jets, you have made some bad picks.
Yes.
You have made some bad picks. Go get something, and just move on. Just do it. Just get somebody, put him, have him hanging on the outside of Madison Square Garden and in Times Square, big photos of him, sell your jerseys. He'll be a top 3 selling jersey in the NFL. Sell it all, get the market excited, sell your season tickets, and just move forward, because that organization, especially now that the Patriots aren't the Patriots, you've been waiting decades for this. You've been waiting 2 decades for them to fall off the top of the mountain. Like, what if the Bills are a fluke? What if Tua doesn't develop fast enough in the Dolphins? You actually, believe it or not, can go from worst to first in a year or two if you make a couple good moves. So
absolutely.
if I'm them, it's a no-brainer for me. You have multiple picks. You still have opportunity, and they have money. They get like $71 million in salary cap space. You can sign guys. I've heard a lot of talk about Allen Robinson potentially going to the Jets.
Yeah.
You get Allen Robinson, Desean Watson, a couple other pieces around there.
Draft a running back.
Yeah, get Travis Etienne late with your later first-round pick.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Clemson guy. You prepare him with Watson, and he looks fantastic. Maybe a Najee Harris from Alabama.
Yeah.
And then you got something there. You're not going to have that opportunity if you don't do it. If I'm them, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I would say for anyone listening to this, quarterbacks are a weird position in the NFL draft because they're really not valued where they're supposed to be. Like if you were looking on pure talent, like when people do their big boards and top 100s and stuff, like Mac Jones, for example, I've seen, his talent is between a first round and a third round. Like that's a big gap. So the reason we see quarterbacks taken, in top 10 so often nowadays is because there's just always question marks about the current starters, the current players in the NFL. And time again, we see there's always, like, look at the Dak Prescotts. There's always a quarterback that comes out of nowhere and surprises. So teams are more reluctant. They're more pressured into trying to find that guy, and they don't want to miss that opportunity. So when you see Justin Fields and Zach Wilson, and I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a bona fide number one. That's no mistaking. But, everyone else going top 5, like, it's not because they're better than, 30 other players. It's because the quarterback position is multiplied infinitely as, you evaluate your roster. So.
And I mean, team control is big. If you got a guy in the first round, you have 5 years of team control. While we were all, killing the Packers last year for trading up and taking Jordan Love, which I'm still going to kill them for. I'm not going to say that. Yeah. I'm not going to say that was I can't believe they didn't get him help. However, if you feel strongly like, hey, Rodgers got 2 more years left, well, okay, well, he plays out 2 years, and then you have Jordan Love for 3 if you take on his 5th-year option at a very, very, very affordable cost. Yeah, at least 3 years, 3 and 4. Year 5, you're going to pay pretty good money. Mm-hmm. But at that point, you've already seen the guy in your organization for 4 years, and you didn't pay him that much over that time. Quarterbacks and edge rushers and left tackles cost you so much money. They do, especially on the market. So if you can get a guy in the first round at a fraction of the cost, look at what Myles Garrett was getting paid until he got his big money. TJ Watt and these guys who were like edge rushers who were putting up, Bradley Chubb when he wasn't hurt with the Broncos, like guys who are putting up monster numbers who their salary is what some guys are making in a game check. Like you have so much control. You have so many, and you have years to figure out if you want to pay them versus free agency where you're just like, you work somewhere else, here's $20 million and you don't pan out. Yeah. So I get it from that perspective that, you kind of like spread your risk and you're able to, put money other places. But I think it's also funny that while we're talking up this draft class so much, I've seen, Todd McShay and Mel Kiper said they think this is going to be the first draft where 4 straight quarterbacks get drafted. And the only one I genuinely feel like is a day one starter is Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. And we're talking about guys, trading up and getting rid of major assets to guys that I don't even genuinely think are day one starters. I really don't.
I agree. I think I was very up and down on Justin Fields. And then when I saw him just absolutely dominate Clemson, I was like, you know what? maybe he is going to be a top 5 pick. And then obviously the game against Alabama was a little different, but he was also playing with broken ribs, I think. It'll be interesting, like I said, Desean is I don't know what chess piece he would be called, but he's the one that impacts the entire game. So we'll see what happens.
I do think that this is going to be the biggest trade haul we've seen and will see for a long time. I think when you think about a 25-year-old quarterback with top 5 potential for a while, he could a proven winner, his skill set, his intangibles, the back half of his contract will be very manageable when these next quarterbacks get paid. He's paid decently now, but we all know how that goes. 2 years from now, it'll be a below market contract. He'll start the contract off probably a little overpaid, and he'll end it a little underpaid. That's the way it works when you sign guys this long. I think it's gonna be the biggest package that we've seen traded. I think 3 first rounders, possibly a player, and a 1 or 2 day 2 picks. I think it's gonna be, huge Sports Center breaking news. I think it's gonna be one of those ones where you're really gonna be like, wow. But as crazy as it is, I think a team like the Jets can give that up and still have picks because of how many picks that they have. And I don't think I've ever seen a team positioned the way the Jets are to give up a lot but still have opportunity to improve their roster. Usually a team, they give up 3 straight years of first-round picks, and they have no cap space, and they have nothing else. They can give up first-round picks. I mean, they have 2 this year. They have 2 next year. Yeah. They have multiple. They have, I think, 3 second-round picks total over the next 2 years. So they have a lot of day 1 and day 2 picks. They can give up a lot and still make draft picks. So it also, the Jamal Adams trade, while I was killing them at first for doing it, if this ends up being essentially trading Jamal Adams in a first-round pick and a second-round pick for Desean Watson, nobody would have ever said no to that trade.
Yeah.
So, seeing 3 first-rounders and a second-rounder is the same thing because they got 2 first-rounders back for Jamal Adams.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up because I was going to say it's literally like, Jamal, a first, and a couple, secondary picks for Desean Watson, which is incredible. So it'll be really interesting. The first, as of recently, I can't think of 2. I mean, Stafford got what? They got 2 picks for Stafford, didn't they? Or was it 1 in Goff?
It was 2 first-round picks, Goff, and I think a third too.
Yeah. Besides that one, the last crazy haul I remember was when the Saints traded for Ricky Williams, that draft spot. Yeah. They gave Washington their entire draft.
Yeah.
Picks 1 through 7 rounds. That was back in 98, 99.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But yeah, I don't know if you'll see that, but you'll definitely they have. I would be shocked if they drafted a player with all of those picks. Honestly, it's not the best move. You need to capitalize off the value of those picks before they diminish. But the one thing about sports is that, especially in the first round, and you see it a lot in the NBA, it's like you'd rather trade for a proven commodity than gamble on a player you are taking a guess on. So we'll see what happens.
And NBA trades have always proved that whoever gets the best player wins the deal. I remember when the Lakers got Anthony Davis, and some people were saying, did they give up too much? And I said, they just got a top 5 basketball player. There is no too much. If they didn't trade LeBron, they didn't give up too much. And guess what? They won an NBA championship because whoever gets the best player wins the deal. If you have to give up pieces, like everybody wants to trade something and not give up anything. It's like when I keep seeing Sixers fans saying, yeah, we'll give you Danny Green and a 2nd-round pick for Kyle Lowry. Not how it works.
Yeah, no.
That's not how it works. If you're going to get something, you must give something. If the Jets are going to get a top 5 quarterback who is 25 years old, it's going to command a high price. But it's a price they can pay. It's not something they are blessed with draft capital. They can afford to give some up, and they have salary cap space. You can absorb his contract. You can bring in one of these top wide receivers. What if Chris Godwin doesn't get franchise tagged and he goes to New York? What if You get Allen Robinson. What if you get Kenny Golladay? You
Yeah.
know, that's a winnable division. Like, I know the Bills had times where they looked great, but I'm not necessarily sold that that's who the Bills are. That could have been an overachieving year. You're not worried about the Patriots, and the Dolphins you're not worried about either. So it's the Jets could go from like a kind of a laughing stock to actually a contender in their division, which has not been something for a while. When you have an opportunity like that, I just don't see how you pass it up.
Yeah. Plus, I think they're not as far off as people think because their defense is very young, and they got some nice pieces. So I mean, you bring in bring in a top free agent wide receiver because, like you said, they have money at draft if they draft not. I'm telling you, Allen Robinson, Najee Harris, and Deshaun Watson, that team automatically becomes pretty scary on offense. So, yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is kind of a closing thought is while we've seen a lot of trades are like in principle trades leading up to the opening of free agency, the once free agency starts, then in between the draft is when the trade stuff really starts heating up because teams start to see who they can get, who they can't get, and then reevaluate their roster to try and bring in different players before the draft and move around. So, it'll be some. It wouldn't surprise me if some team came out of nowhere and traded up to try and get one of these top 5 quarterbacks that we keep talking about. But there's always surprises, so that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, and especially a year with no combine. I'm very, very, and I'm going to be honest. I'm going to say it here on this pod. I won't be surprised if Mac Jones is not the 5th quarterback taken and he sneaks up and leapfrogs somebody for number 4. Because if you listen to the NFL coaches talk about him at the Senior Bowl and how good they like and them the NFL coaches with him and his intangibles and all these things about Mac Jones, these other quarterbacks aren't going to have a combine. They'll have their pro days and they'll do things individual, but they're not going to go up against side by side, throwing after Trey Lance throws, throwing after Fields throws, throwing after Wilson throws. I think not having them there, and because Mac Jones had that opportunity during the Senior Bowl, he's the only one who actually is a senior.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of positive things about him. His teammates talk super highly. I mean, they asked Devontae Smith to wear Mac Jones, and he said definitively Mac Jones. Like now, can you say, yeah, that's his current quarterback? Sure, like he's doing that because he was there.
Yeah.
But here's the reality: is like he's hyping that guy up for a reason.
Yeah.
A lot of other people have been talking up him high. I won't be surprised if he's the 4th quarterback taken and not the 5th, the way a lot of these mock drafts are playing out.
There is always one team that decides to come in and completely change what we thought of a player's ranking. So, yeah, I didn't think Baker was going number 1 to Cleveland, so we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think, we'll have a whole episode on the draft, probably a couple. I would not be shocked to see 5 QBs go top 15. Like that's
top 15. I think that's a definite.
Yeah.
Because if Mac Jones falls to the Patriots at 15, the Patriots are taking Mac Jones at 15.
I would say so.
He is like the prototypical Patriot quarterback. Like if he falls to them at 15, that is 100% the so top 15 is a guarantee. It won't surprise me if there's 5 that go top 12.
I can see that as well, which is great for other teams who don't need a quarterback. I mean, I honestly think Sewell was going to fall right into the Bengals' lap, which perfect for them. So,
yeah, and they're a team where the only other non-quarterback you even consider taking, that high would be one of the receivers or Kyle Pitts. And the Bengals got a great young wide receiver core with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. Their AJ Green, I think, will move on, but they got young guys there. So I don't think that they go that route, especially after taking T. Higgins with the first pick of the 2nd round last year. Sewell just feels like the gift package that they need.
Yeah.
unless they trade back. The only way I could see it is if they peg that Rashawn Slater is a better pick for them, which I've heard a lot of people are very high on Rashawn Slater, the lineman out of Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
If they feel like, hey, we can trade back, 3-4 spots, and he'll still be there because we think there's going to be a run on the receivers and maybe Patrick Surtain and Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
That's the only way I think that Sewell doesn't end up. But I don't see them taking somebody else at 5 that's not him.
Yeah, it's going to be a very offense-oriented first-round pick or first-round draft. So we'll see how the chips may fall. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up our 32 starting QBs. Definitely some obvious picks, and then obviously the question mark is Desean Watson, is Sam Darnold, is Cam Newton, does Kirk Cousins stay in Minnesota? Who's Washington's quarterback? Will Dallas finally give Prescott his contract?
I think that's good.
All right. Well, then on that note, we will talk to everyone later. Look forward to some NBA talk next week. March Madness coming up, and then obviously more free agency and draft news. So looking forward to it. It's getting exciting. All right. Thanks for joining us, Nick, and I'll talk to you in a bit.
All right. Thanks, Dakota.
Peace out, man.